This is OXORA, your business world, your business channel. Welcome to the OXORA Business Channel. I'm Monique Coppola, your host, and with us today is Advisor Abbate, the CEO of OXORA. And we're going to talk a bit about you, sir.
How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Good.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your background. Where are you from?
I was born and raised in Italy, and my grandparents sponsored my first trip as a tourist to the U.S., to New York City, when I was 16. Although I've been asking for it since I was 13. And then after that, I spent about a month in New York. I stayed at YMCA on the Upper East Side.
Is that where you first came, is New York, when you came to the United States?
Yeah, I came to New York City.
What was the appeal?
Well, I'll tell you. The appeal was, I was studying multimedia, and I was studying in the city where above us there was a NATO base.
A naval base?
NATO.
Oh, NATO.
Yeah. And so occasionally we would see the American soldiers with their, when they were off duty with their cars, and AFI plates, American forces in Italy. And then, obviously, studying multimedia, we would touch upon not only the Italian media, but also the large American networks. I believe the combination of the two, the studying during multimedia about the large American networks and seeing the militaries, inspired my curiosity to take the first trip.
And also maybe, was it the movie business as well? Maybe Hollywood a little bit? Because I know a lot of the shows there are American.
Sure. I don't think so much the movies. I think more so the studies and observing the military. We're curious about the large automobiles they would drive, because back then we all had the small Fiats, and they had these large Trans Ams and Pontiacs and Jeeps, and so it gives you the sense of grandeur as it truly we were studying about. And then the curiosity to see NBC, CBS, these large networks, where are they actually, and how large is the building where they're situated in? Was the thought back then, and the desire to always be involved somewhat in internationalism. I think that started when I was 12, 13. I would go to bed by listening to a Grundig shortwave radio, and my grandpa had brought from America on a trip. And a Grundig, a German radio that he had brought from America, is quite intriguing, all of that. But with that radio, I would be able to tune in to Germany and listen to foreign news. I'd be able to tune in to BBC in England. I'd be able to tune in to Paris Blue. And I would go to bed listening to the different news in different languages.
Wow, so a well-versed preteen you were.
Yes, I was. And now they're in vogue again, but back then the headphones were very, very large, and they would actually add as a cuddling my neck and my head, between my pillow, and I would just fall asleep with them on.
Absorb.
I remember that.
Wow, that's interesting. So you were 16 and your parents, your grandparents sponsored a trip, and what happened after that?
Well, then after spending 1 month in New York City, on the Upper East Side at the YMCA, back then was occupied primarily by international students, enters that were there, but student tourists and students that had relocated. So it was a very nice experience for me, meeting other students from different parts of the world. So after 1 month, clearly returning to Italy, it was like turning the lights off. Because, at that age, visiting New York City is just grand.
Oh, I know, it's true, isn't it? I remember that too. My grandmother actually brought me to New York City for the first time, and it was just so exciting. So you go back to Italy, and then how did you end up back here?
Well, I expressed to my grandparents, they were raising me, and my parents as well, my desire to return for school, and they said, well, you first need to finish your high school here and your military obligation. At the time, military was mandatory. So not only I finished high school, I finished the military obligation. I then, it was during a period that we had a severe earthquake. So I engaged into participating in a caravan to bring aid into the mountains in certain areas of Italy. Then after that, I was again granted with some sponsoring money to come again to New York City and stay for a while. But no one ever thought I would remain, you know. My grandparents and my parents, my dad is an entrepreneur, and my grandparents on both sides of my dad and my mom's side, entrepreneurs as well. So perhaps they always thought I would take over one of their several businesses, or of all of them, you know, perhaps. So they thought I would come to America for 2-3 years, you know. But then 2-3 years turned into more, and then here I am still.
Wow. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I have one and one.
Oh, okay. And from there, what did you do? So you stayed in the United States for a couple of years, and what happened?
Well, I initially that was the thought, and then I started to work because it's quite costly to go to school and live in the U.S., and especially in Manhattan. Oh. It's so today, but relatively speaking, it was so back then as well.
Absolutely.
And to explain to my parents and grandparents that going to university was a whopping $50,000 or so a year, including living expenses, I'm certain they would say, why don't you just come here? It's free. Yeah. And you have everything you need. You know, what is really the need of studying there? And they wouldn't understand it. And so I started to work in in a field that was somewhat similar to multimedia, electronics related, and it was lighting design. And I appreciate the art and science of lighting, because that's what it is, lighting design. It's an art and a science. You get to design, but you need to understand how it functions, you know, the color correctiveness. And during my multimedia study, I studied stage lighting. So I took that learning of stage lighting and the practice of stage lighting, because during the summer times I would help a professor set up the stages. The bands in Italy would only bring their instruments. We would bring the microphones, the audio equipment, the lighting equipment, set up street lighting for parking, audio mixer, lighting mixer, all. And one of my professors had all of this as a side business after school. So he would enlist helpers. And I was his primary helper, you know, for 3 summers.
Oh, that's great.
We would go do these parties all over, and then I would get home 3, 4 o'clock in the morning from these parties. And yeah. And I've taken that knowledge, applied it to lighting design for architecture. I've taken some classes at Parsons School of Design for architectural lighting design. And I realized that only offering lighting design wasn't sufficient in architecture for homes or buildings, because builders and homeowners weren't used to recognizing their profession. In fact, even the profession of architecture was fairly new to be recognized. Before, one would have a house designed by an engineer. And typically one would have the lighting supplied and installed by an electrician. So that would be the typical. Then architects started to become more popular, and more common would be to hire an architect to design your home. But for lighting designer, still today, it's not the norm unless you have a very large project. So I realized that in order to supply lighting design, I needed to do the electrical work as well. So I then obtained, well, clearly I worked as an electrician, literally, and because you needed to have a certain amount of years in order to qualify to get a license.
Right.
And then I did that. I was the youngest at 22 in New York State to ever obtain an electrical master license.
Really?
Yeah, I think I still maintain the record.
Wow.
And so then I created a company that would do design build. So I would be able to say, my approach was opposite of electrical contractors. My approach was, I will do the lighting design, but since I'm licensed, I can also do the installation. Then I would be able to sell my lighting design.
Like a one-stop shop?
Yeah, it was quite successful, actually, because I would be able to supply lighting that no one could purchase locally. I would go to the Milan Lighting Fair every year, supply very unique, trendy designs, and then modify them to meet the UL requirements here. And then I would provide those, spec those for the projects. And it was quite difficult for anyone else to create a comparative estimate because everything I supplied was foreign mostly. And it was a custom design. And it was very trendy because I would install back then halogen lighting, low voltage lighting, xenon lamps, all these terms that no one had heard. In fact, it was, to give you an example, how far behind America is in using energy efficient equipment. When I came from Italy, in my kitchen at home, we already had fluorescent lighting. And there was nowhere you could find a fluorescent lamp anywhere in any store in America when I came here. You couldn't. And it was, and no one knew at an electrical supply house what a Kelvin was. A Kelvin is a measure of color of light. So if you wanted to buy a fluorescent lamp and say, I wanted 3500 Kelvin or 2500 Kelvin, or depending upon the color rendition that you needed, what is a Kelvin? So really, because this is a wealthy nation and it's always been wealthy, and the energy cost has always been very low, which has an effect on everything from the food we purchase in the supermarket to the cars we drive and the size of them, and the sizes of the homes and so on. Yeah. So after that, I was allowed to earn quite a bit of money and continue the studying in real estate law and finance and accounting and so on. And then I made investments in real estate and several other businesses. I've owned myself hundreds of businesses. That's why it allows me to be able to give guidance to other entrepreneurs and truly understand what they go through in managing their people.
And speaking of which, I understand that you are the CEO of 61 companies?
Yes, currently I corporate manage 61 companies, and including those that belong to our clients, obviously. And some belong to OXORA, some belong to our clients, but in together 61. I can manage that at the moment, but sometimes it may increase, and other times when the workload is a bit much, then I hire a co-director, or I assign work to some of our existing co-directors.
Well, I'm not surprised given your background. I mean, you're somewhat of a prodigy, I have to say.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So what do you think makes you uniquely qualified to be a CEO?
I don't believe that anyone needs to have a certain uniqueness to be the CEO of a company. I believe that those decisions are made when the beliefs and the ethics and the goals and the drive of an individual meet with the same beliefs, ethical values, goals, objectives of the members of the board. Or in our case, a client. That could be an entrepreneur, but could be a family leader that is interested in making investments. We like to do business based on that philosophy. We like to do business with people that believe what we believe and that are in tune with our criteria of living, being socially responsible, and adhering to certain standards and ethical values and respecting the law. When those fundamental beliefs and criteria are met, then suddenly there is no limit. You could start as an employee at any level with an organization, and you could quickly find yourself to arrive at the position of CEO. But another question perhaps could be, what do CEOs have in common? All CEOs, regardless of which organization we work for. I think we are not afraid of the chores. One indication of the ability of an individual that will demonstrate no limits throughout their professional growth are those individuals that are willing and able to roll up their sleeves and take care of the chores. Wherever they are, they could be home and they see the trash needs to be taken out. They don't turn the other way. They just say, whoa, it's full. Let me do something about it. Something spills, let me do something about it. The shoes are out of place, you fix them. You just have a knack for taking care of chores. I think if we can teach children to do chores, to really willingly be responsible and take care of chores, we are setting them for a great future. Because in any organization, leaders want to see employees that take initiatives. They are proactive, they find solutions. We don't want to be suggesting. I mean, clearly we know.
Right.
We don't need to know or prove that we know. We want to see that you know.
Right.
We want to see that you have taken the initiatives. Clearly, we notice when you don't take the initiative, and we notice when you do take the initiative. We don't mention it all the time because clearly we don't want to be a burden.
Right.
But it comes a time for evaluation, and you say, is it worth keeping this person or not? And then when that time occurs, then you suddenly see yourself being promoted and being promoted and being promoted. And you're going to be in the right place at the right time, and you'll be promoted to a CEO. And that's essentially what it is, because luck happens when excellent preparation meets opportunity.
What kind of CEO do you think your employees would say you are?
You should ask them.
If you had to guess,
And I like to believe that they see me as a fair and friendly individual. And perhaps all of them would say I have a good eye for details. And I don't think that's unique to me. I believe anyone in a leadership position should be attentive to details. Otherwise, it's not appropriate to not be attentive to details and run a business. But they've also discovered that I'm fair and firm with my decisions. Always very fair, but I don't go back after I have made a decision on certain aspects.
Really?
Yes, I don't change my mind. If I say this is what we're going to do, and that is what we're going to do, or if I say the relationship is terminated because of this and that, and regardless of what occurs. Yeah, I would say fair and firm is that how I feel I conduct business. And I like to be friendly, be very sociable. I mean, I believe very much in social skills. So if I'm not one myself to exhibit that, then who should?
Now, lastly, we have a question from a viewer, if we have time for that. This is from Anna S. And she asks, Advisor, how is OXORA involved in the fashion industry? And can you tell us a brand or a label that you're involved with now?
Sure. I could mention that some of the organizations we have worked with are at the head of certain brands that are the Uniqlo and the Gap and Banana Republic. Some of these brands are more well known, and the Brooks Brothers and others. They are individuals that have been at the head of these organizations. They are stockholders that have been involved with these organizations, and they are the parent companies that have been that currently control these organizations. So any one of these individuals, we have been at one point or another involved, managed, represented on their behalf, and continues to increase this level of interest from the fashion industry because we use a completely different approach that within the same industry, when you call someone within the same industry, you often find the same resolve, find the same solutions. And I could give you many examples, and perhaps we can discuss this another time. But because we are involved in many different industries, allows us, the international corporate management business that we do allows us to be involved in so many different industries. We have a different opinion. It could be a dentist that has many clinics. It could be a Botox clinic that is expanding. It could be maritime, it could be housing, it could be fashion, it could be music. So we apply some of the knowledge that we have earned elsewhere into another industry. And so this is truly different thinking rather than traditionally the human resources department of a company keeps seeking someone that has studied fashion, that has worked in the fashion industry. And so what is the novelty associated with that? You truly need to acquire someone, especially in business development, that has great social skills, that perhaps fantastic at public relations, that can really able to understand what is branding. Not so much what is the style of clothing, but what does branding mean? Is clothing branding? Clothing is not branding. Branding is about the creation of an individual and how this individual presents itself to the world, this difference between style and elegance.
Well, I hope that answered your question, Anna S. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. I'm Monique Coppola, and I'd like to thank advisor Abbate. And you're tuned into the OXORA Business Channel. Make sure to follow us on social media, send us your questions or comments, and perhaps we'll include them in our next show. Thank you so much for watching.
Cheers.
Please join the conversation. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, OXORA, Your Business World. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Leave your comments and questions, and we may include them in our next show. Feel free to email us at contact@oxora.com. Until next time, thank you for watching the OXORA Business Channel.